Hello everybody, I'm Sylvain Laval, I'm professor and researcher in philosophy, and I would like to tell you about this strange thing that is the machine with a human face. I'm going to deal with this issue of shift from artificial intelligence to artificial sentience. Well, I would have to start with the myth of the humanitor, and that's to say the possible substitution of the machine for the human as regards the mind functions. That has been the heart of the research program on artificial intelligence since the outset. But the idea is to produce an identical or similar performance in a machine for the logical and noetic abilities. And the problem is even more acute when it comes to substituting the human machine for other functions, empirical and aesthetical, sometimes called inferior when compared to those of intelligence. These multiple attitudes of experience, namely sensation, perception, emotion and sentiment, to which consciousness can be added, turn attention to the sentience. One could suggest a research program on the artificial sentience, on the exploration and the transfer of the functions and abilities of human experience and senses to a machine. Well, the idea of a total substitution, which concerns both the mind and the body, corresponds to an ancient myth of technology, of the art of production of artifacts and possibly of artificial creatures. I propose to call it the myth of the humanitor, the fictitious or imaginary idea of a humanoid artificial creature which allows a total and perfect substitution between human and machine. The humanitor is an artificial creature which combines and articulates a whole set of human functions and abilities beyond those more classic of the actor or the producer, namely the reasoner for reasoning and intelligence, the cognitor for knowledge and belief, the volitor for will and desire, and finally the experiencer for experience, sensation, emotion, possibly consciousness. The humanitor as an artificial creature that replaces the human is held to be a myth, but this does not prevent many researchers from trying to realize it. The humanitor cannot exist, for there can be no artificial creature which substitutes perfectly the machine for the human. Then, just as there is no artificial intelligence, there is no artificial sentience, stricto sensu. The major argument in support of this thesis is that if an artificial creature such as humanity existed, it would be actually a human being. It would be endowed with the same general physical and psychic constitution, and only its creation would be artificial, that is, not sexual. Nevertheless, I am convinced that in a certain type of interaction between the human and the machine, it is possible that the machine passes the test of humanity and can be confused with a human. There are actually various reasons for moving from a research program on intelligence to a research program on sentience. From an operational point of view, it is justified by the need to have machines which, when interacting with humans, behave in a manner that shows their ability to express sensations, emotions, and even consciousness. It is a way of making machines more human, especially if they are called upon to play an increasingly important role in our daily lives. From a reflexive point of view, this shift from intelligence to sentience is justified by the need to better understand the abilities of machines to process information, so that they come as close as possible to the human's processing. This makes it possible to measure the possible difference between the ability of the machine and that of the human, and to learn therefore about the singularity of the human, which in turn questions the singularity of the machine. The shift from AI, artificial intelligence, to AS, artificial sentience, leads to take sides in the debate among strong AI and weak AI, as suggested by Searle, in favor of a strong program, even if it can be shown that only the weak one can be achieved. Thus, strong AI refers to the artificial intelligence program which envisions the intelligent machine as endowed with ability not only of reasoning but also of consciousness. In comparison, weak AI bounds to an intelligent machine deprived from this full scope of abilities, and that can then function as a device intended to better understand human intelligence, the only one provided with consciousness. The parallel could function for artificial sentience if strong AS designates the program of artificial sentience in which the sentient machine is endowed with an ability of sensation and emotion and to some extent consciousness. In comparison, weak AS relates to a sentient machine deprived from this full scope of abilities and that can function as a device intended to better understand human sentience and the role of consciousness. Now, if you try to define the principle of artificial intelligence, it can be formulated as follows. A machine can think like a human. From there, you can specify two versions, one strong and the other weak. A machine can think exactly like a human or approximately like a human from the point of view of reasoning and of consciousness. When it is said that about a machine that it can think like a human, it does not mean the same thing as a machine that thinks as a human. The bodily expression of the mental life draws attention, or more exactly, the coupling of thought with the words of language, as well as the behavior of body. A rational approach to the thought suggests that it merges with the different types of reasoning that have been identified in logic, from deduction to induction and abduction. If rule R, then cases C, or if cases C, then rule R. However, a broader approach to thinking includes, in addition to reasoning, a variety of forms of intelligence, as shown in Gardner's work on multiple intelligence, frames of mind, with sometimes an emphasis put on creation and invention. The term intelligence is taken with caution in psychology, and that of performance is often preferred to it for various fields: execution, adaptation, control, speed of processing, abilities of working memory, of reasoning. Actually, there is still a long way to go to replace the human with machine. Now, if we compare it, the principle of artificial sentience could be formulated as follows. A machine can feel like a human. And again, you can have two versions, one strong and the other weak. A machine can feel exactly like a human or approximately like a human from the point of view of sensation and emotion and of consciousness. Again, when it is said that a machine can feel like a human, this view does not imply that it feels as a human. If that would imply that it is a human. Sentience belongs to the vast realm of experience, which covers a wide range of meanings from sensation to sentiment. The experiential approach, in first person, focuses on phenomenal experience, possibly distinct from one person to another, since no one can have access to the mental states of the others, for example, in the way I view a squirrel. However, this point is disputed by Wittgenstein, who notes that even the most personal experiences, such as those of sensation and emotion, suppose a public language and disqualify the idea of a private one just for myself. The difference in experience between sensation and perception emphasizes the judgment. For a red cube, for instance, I have the sensation of the color red, but I have the perception of a red body as a unit that occupies a certain volume in space. As to the emotions, they are not easy to define, but they have one thing in common. They are the subject's overt responses to meaningful events and can trigger distinctive bodily changes and behaviors. Now remains the question of consciousness. That is one of the most difficult problems to solve. in any study of both intelligence and sentience, all the more if they are artificial. Numerous studies have attempted to define what consciousness is and to determine whether it is possible that a machine could be endowed with this ability characteristic of humans or certain non-humans, like animals. Chalmers makes the distinction between the easy problems and the difficult problems of consciousness. The easy problems relate to the explanation of cognitive and behavioral functions. For instance, the ability to discriminate, to categorize and react to environmental stimuli, the integration of information by a cognitive system, the reportability of mental states, the ability of a system to access its own internal states, the focus of attention, the deliberate control of behavior, the difference between awakeness and sleep. As to the difficult problems, they relate to the explanation of conscious experience, whether you call it phenomenal or qualitative, if what is insisted on is the qualia. If one takes a closer look at the variety of abilities that are grouped under the term consciousness, it is not surprising that it is found on both sides of intelligence and sentience. As shown in this list from Elam, Brani and Yampolsky, one will find attention, creativity, dynamism, emotion, imagination, intelligence, intentionality, language, quality, perception, self, and volition. So a vast list of aspects that both refers to intelligence or sentience. This question of consciousness refers more fundamentally to the kind of tests that have been designed to characterize a machine as capable of being endowed with intelligence and sentience. The test of the machine intelligence is now quite well established, even if it continues to generate a lot of debate, but it remains to be clarified what a test for machine sentience is or can be. Here I favor an approach that insists on the behavior and the interpretation made of by a judge, while another approach would rather emphasize the architecture of a system. In addition, I favor an approach which, in the wake of the original Turing tests, develops a test modality that is not limited to a computer, but results in the action of a machine, a robot for instance, like in the total Turing tests. It can be suggested that for intelligence as for sentience, a test of humanity calls upon the criterion of the action of an agent, but without thereby reducing to it the whole of the human behavior of a machine. The Turing test for the machine intelligence was originally an imitation game, which consisted in developing a machine that cannot be distinguished from a human. Turing suggests that a judge G exchanges typed messages with a human H on the one hand and a machine M on the other, messages that can relate to all kinds of subjects. Judge G does not know which of these two interlocutors, whom he knows under the names A and B, is the machine M and the human H. In the rules of game, it is stipulated that after a series of exchanges, the judge must guess who between the two of them is respectively the human being and the machine. Turing believes that if a machine one day does not allow correct identification by a human, it is an intelligent machine, or if you put it in other words, a thinking machine. But beyond correctness, for instance through calculation, a machine must be human-like and then can take time for operations, possibly make mistakes, or even have a sense of humor. Some philosophers, among them Searle, believe that even if you manage to complete a program that passes the Turing test, it doesn't prove that you have put intelligence into the computer. This is his famous thought experiment of the Chinese room, in which an individual who does not speak a word of Chinese can nevertheless use a set of language rules and thus apply them to have a conversation in Chinese. Hence this basic idea that programs cannot think. Literally speaking, a computer does not speak Chinese, for it does not understand this language as humans can do. The machines will therefore never be intelligent, even if they pass the Turing test, because the latter is not a sufficient condition for the intelligence of a machine. Another criticism of the Turing test was made by French, who argued that passing the test is not a necessary condition of intelligence, as shown by the example of the seagull, taken as a standard test for any flying object. Thus, the Turing test is perhaps a sufficient condition of intelligence, but of human intelligence, and it is linked to the language used for dialogues, which prevents it from being considered universal. Now, as to the test for the sentience of a machine, it is not certain that this kind of test should be based on that of Turing, but it can be fruitful to explore this track, as already envisaged by Campbell, who speaks of a game of human imitation called Imitation Man. Attention is focused on the conversation between a judge G, a human H, and a machine M, but the main difference in the sentience test is that the content of information and the mode of communication are not the only things that counts. It is also information and communication, as it shows a set of aspects of a partner's behavior that testifies the presence of a sentience in the language itself. The test of humanity of a machine is moved towards the expression of sentience in verbal language, towards what reveals the sensation, the emotion, the sentiment, or even the consciousness of A or B. Now, one could also conceive that the sentience tests takes into account, according to the excess close to physical information, and consequently to psychic information, the non-verbal communication, for instance, in the expression of anger. However, one wonders if verbal and non-verbal communication and the coherent coupling between the two does not require something like a grammar of expression. Searle is also famous for developing the pragmatics, the study of speech acts, which supposes that the meaning of a statement depends on the speaker's intentions and on the speech situation. Behind the intention of a speech act stands the intentionality, the relation of consciousness to an object, which can be extended by considering the background of this relation, the tendency or the disposition of belief and desire. Well, this notion of intentionality can be useful beyond intelligence for the sentience test as a necessary condition in order to give a meaning to an action. Now, one could argue that this is not a sufficient condition, in the sense that if a machine passed the sentience test, it would not prove that it has intentionality, but just that it behaves in action and communication as if it had an intentionality. A more radical objection puts forward the idea of the philosophical zombie, as in Kirk's thought experiment, according to which it is possible that a being has all the characteristics of a human, but is found lacking in sentience. Artificial sentience is concerned that the relation between the physical aspects of the bodily behavior are also narrowly coupled with the psychic activity of a mind endowed with a subjective experience, that is, the hard problem of consciousness for Chalmers. Now, regarding human-machine interaction, well, a significant number of tests of humanity gives primacy to the interaction between the human and the machine, on the narrow mode if the interaction is bounded to conversation, on the broader mode if it includes the behavior in action. This is all the difference between a partial Turing test, Turing 1, and a total Turing test, Turing 2. But one can wonder if the first kind, with its restrictive clause of conversation, is still relevant. If it is considered obsolete, the move to the second kind of test, which widens it to action and behavior, results in the production of machines that in their physical aspect can be confused with humans. Well, this clause also assumes that the behavior of these machines is like a door open on a psychic life, which must have a certain form or structure and show some coherence. But perhaps this is too demanding a clause, for it suggests that humans themselves would be fully coherent beings, while simple ordinary experience proves the opposite. It is therefore the idea of a personality of machines, endowed with a certain character coupled with a certain temper, that it would be wise to direct reflection on the action of artificial devices. But the personality of a machine, if such a thing exists, cannot be kept aside from the codes of a society or a culture which owns a certain grammar of the person, and for some of them only refers to the notion of ego. All in all, the humaniter as an idea is a machine which not only thinks like a human, feels like a human, but also can coordinate these two kinds of abilities and link them to another one, action, so that the machine also acts like a human. One could thus suggest that the idea of a humaniter as a total machine requires not only the principle of AI, the principle of AS, but also the principle of artificial action, AA. This AA principle could be formulated as follows: a machine can act like a human. Thus, a humaniter is a machine which articulates the functions and ability of the reasoner, the cognitor, the volitor, the experiencer, and finally the actor. This is a point to keep in mind in the project of making a both intelligent and sentient machine, namely a machine that, properly speaking, is not and cannot be a humaniter, but that nevertheless can be a machine with a human face. Thank you for your attention.